When you flip the lights on in the province of Ontario, fully half of that electricity is produced by one company, OPG, Ontario Power Generation, the publicly owned utility. Its new president and CEO is Jeffrey Lyash, who's been on the job for several months now. He's got some big, very expensive plans for OPG, so we thought we'd get him in here to find out more. And with that, we welcome Jeffrey Lyash to TVO. It's good to meet you.
Well, thanks, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome to the province of Ontario. Let's just, because you're new here, we thought we'd put up some bullet points and just introduce people to you and see what your background is. For example, you are by training a mechanical engineer from Drexel University in the States. You've been in the utility industry since 1981, a former inspector with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission from 85 to 93. You worked your way up through Progress Energy and then eventually Duke Energy Corporation, becoming CEO, and there are your years there. And apparently Ontario got you from Chicago Bridge and Iron Power, where you had spent the previous few years. And I guess the first thing I want to know is your first impression of the electricity generation system here that you are now responsible for compared to other places that you've worked.
Yeah, well, there's more the same than different, frankly, Steve. You know, I chose this career, and I'm glad I did, because power, specifically electric power, is so important. It's a driver in the economy, people's security, quality of life. It's a product that we all rely on every day. And so the responsibility that comes with that and the stewardship that comes with that really is universal. Anybody that's in this business has that, and I feel that same burden here as I did anywhere else. Of course, this is public power, so it also comes with the dimension of not only providing safe, clean, reliable, sustainable power at the lowest possible cost, which is our mission, but also supporting the development of technology and supporting deployment of public policy that Ontarians insist on and deserve.
Now, you're a Pennsylvania guy.
I am.
Any qualms about upping and moving to Canada?
Well, you know, my wife and I are pretty flexible. We were excited about the opportunity. You know, what I'm most interested in at this stage of my career is having something important and challenging to do where I feel I can make a contribution. And we feel like Ontario and Canada is it. Of course, we've got 7 grandkids back in the States, and so that's been the only really hard part of it.
7 grandkids?
That's right.
You're
That's
54
right.
years old, you've got 7 grandkids.
I do, and number 8 on the way. We're very proud of it.
Well, congratulations. Let us remind everybody that when you flip the light switch on here in the province of Ontario, here's how your electricity is generated. And here's our pie chart. And one can see that nuclear makes up the lion's share of how we make electricity in this province. And if you go around, there's hydroelectric at 22%, gas and wind, biofuels, and of course, conspicuous by its absence on that list is coal. We no longer have coal-fired generating stations in this province. They're phased out a couple of years ago. How much of that mix are you responsible for?
OPG provides about half of the electrical energy to the province that's consumed on an annual basis, and we do it at about a 40% discount to the rest of the market. So we really are the low-cost provider in Ontario, and very proud of that, and that's a role we want to maintain. Our power is about 99.7% greenhouse gas free, because the lion's share of it comes from nuclear and hydro, some biomass, and if we're successful, some solar, with just a tiny bit of gas.
And of the 61% of the nuclear mix in Ontario, what percentage of that do you create?
We're between about 35 and 40% of that. The remainder is Bruce Power. So the 3 principal providers of nuclear power are Pickering and Darlington, OPG facilities, and Bruce Power, which is OPG owned but leased to a public-private partnership that does an excellent job running Bruce Power.
So they're not really, do you consider them competition?
No, I don't. You know, I think in this segment, the importance of electricity is so paramount, particularly in the nuclear business, that we don't view each other as competitors. We collaborate, we cooperate. As a matter of fact, Duncan Hawthorne and I have a collaboration agreement around the refurbishments for these plants to share lessons learned to make sure we're both successful.
Well, since you're on the issue of refurbishment, let's talk about that. Darlington, you weren't here when Darlington was built, but I was, and this goes back 30 years, and what a dog's breakfast this was from the get-go. It was over budget and behind schedule almost from the beginning, and now you're talking about, what is it, $12.8 billion over 10 years to rebuild?
That's right.
Okay. What are you going to do there?
Yeah, well, certainly the early life of nuclear power was difficult. These were first-of-a-kind plants. There were challenges. It was a high interest rate environment, and there were licensing delays. So we can't ignore that history. We have to learn from it. And we did, and we have worked on the operation of these plants to the point where now the Darlington unit is one of the best performing nuclear plants in the world, and I would argue the best performing CANDU reactor in the world. So it's a great candidate to refurbish, because you can be confident if we're successful at doing it, it's going to pay off that investment over the following 30 years. It's a big project, $12.8 billion, as you mentioned. And so it is critical that we execute this project on time, on budget, at the level of quality that a nuclear facility demands, and safely. And that's what we're determined to do. Part of my due diligence before I decided to come here, as I said, was looking at the challenge. Was it something I thought I can contribute to? And as part of that look, more specifically, is OPG ready to take on something of the magnitude of Darlington? Have they prepared? And the answer should be obvious. If I hadn't been able to answer that question, yes, I wouldn't be here.
You've answered in the affirmative, but as you look at the past of this company, it's never come in on time or on budget when it comes to nuclear build.
Well, you know, but there have been major projects run by OPG in the past on the Pickering station that have come in on budget and on schedule, so the company is capable. But more specifically, the preparation that has gone in to Darlington refurbishment, 5 years in the making, is exhaustive. The best preparation that I've seen for a mega project in my career, and I've seen quite a few over $1 billion. So I think the preparation has been just outstanding. A couple other critical things when you take on a project of this nature. Is the scope clear? Are you very clear about exactly what is going to be executed? And that is the case here. The scope is very clear. Have you completed all the engineering necessary before you start the work? So you do the right work the first time. And the answer is yes. The engineering products were complete last August. And the last item I'd mention is there a realistic cost and schedule that recognizes that not all will go well, understands the embedded risks, and accounts for them in cost and schedule? And again, I can tick this box. The organization has done an excellent job. I mention those because in my experience, those are the things that if you get them wrong, set mega projects off in the wrong direction and ultimately lead to cost and schedule overruns. Execution's critical. We got a good plan. Now we have to execute it, but we have a good plan.
You do have some history dealing with, what's the technical term? Turkeys, right? You do have, I mean, there's Crystal River in Florida. Okay, Crystal River, which I guess was shut down in 2009.
That's right.
Has it reopened yet?
No. Crystal River's been retired.
It's done.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, there were issues with that plant design, and there were physical issues with it that just made it non-economic to return the plant to service.
So what did you learn from, I mean, clearly that was not supposed to happen. That was supposed to be a project that would continue to provide power for Floridians and beyond.
That's right.
And now it won't. What did you learn from that you might be able to bring here?
Yeah, well, you must really understand the design of the plant and the engineering behind the activities that you're going to undertake, and with particular emphasis on first-of-a-kind evolutions. And so it's one of the things I looked at in the preparation for Darlington. How well had the organization done that? And I think it's done it fairly well.
First of a, what'd you call it? First of a kind?
First of a kind. So anytime you're going to undertake a project or an activity that is the first time it's been attempted, you need to be particularly careful with that. You really need to understand all of the embedded risk and what could go wrong. Luckily, in the Darlington refurbishment, there are very few first-of-a-kind activities. And the first-of-a-kind activities that are being undertaken had extensive analysis, full-scale mock-up, tooling and testing complete outside of the plant before we ever set foot in the plant.
Tell me whether this is a first-of-a-kind for you here. You're not dealing with a typical board of directors. You're not dealing with private ownership. You're dealing with politics. The boss, I guess, technically, is the Minister of Energy. And I don't know how much contact or how much experience you have dealing with the politics around nuclear energy or energy generation, but there's been a ton of it in this province for 40 years. Have you thought about how that's going to have an impact on what you're trying to do?
Oh, certainly. That's part of the environment. It's what you have to be effective dealing with. Now, I must tell you, there are advantages to having a single shareholder over having multiple shareholders. There are also disadvantages. It's not a question of one's better or worse. It's just a different approach that you have to take to managing that relationship. I think in Ontario here, we're lucky. I've been impressed that the Minister of Energy and the staff there are very knowledgeable of the issues. They've been very engaged with OPG, particularly on the lead up to the Darlington decision and to the Pickering decision. And so I think the working relationship there is quite good. It's challenging, as it ought to be, but it's constructive.
Well, one of the things we've been told in the past is that every time politics gets involved, the price tag goes up. And that one of the reasons that OPG, or its previous company, Ontario Hydro, had so much difficulty bringing in these nuclear projects on time and on budget was political interference. Have you had that conversation with the minister, and how do you avoid that this time?
Well, I can't really comment on the history because I wasn't here. I can only tell you about my experience over the last 6 months, and I just haven't had issue. Our discussions have been frank, open, I think science and technology based, and where there are concerns expressed to me from the shareholder, they are legitimate concerns that I need to address.
Have you had a chance to meet Jack Gibbons yet, this guy with the Ontario Clean Air Alliance?
I have, briefly. Jack and I, we had a session where I invited a number of historic interveners or opposition to OPG in for an information session to talk about things like the Darlington refurb, and Jack attended.
Jack is going to be on the program tomorrow night, and we are going to talk about this, obviously. And I think one of the things he'll tell us is no nuclear project in Ontario history has ever come in on time or on budget. In fact, they've often exceeded the budget by 2.5 times. How would you assure him, and of course Ontarians in general, that won't happen on your watch?
Yeah, well, I'd say a couple of things. The first is that there have been projects here in Canada, nuclear-based, that have come in on time, on budget, very challenging projects. So the record isn't quite as dismal as Jack might paint. However, you got to acknowledge that there have been plenty of over-budget, over-schedule projects in the early days of the nuclear fleet. But I would say that the issue isn't nuclear projects. The issue is mega projects in general. Building projects of this scale, magnitude, cost, complexity, whether they're the Big Dig in Boston or the bridge system in Scandinavia or Muskrat Falls or Darlington refurb, it's the nature of mega projects to be challenging. The way that we're approaching the Darlington refurb is to acknowledge that, to focus on the risks and some of these things I mentioned earlier, and go into this eyes wide open with the right schedule contingency, the right cost contingency, the right planning, the right preparation. The result of that is I'm confident that we can execute this project on time and on schedule, and we'll begin to demonstrate that in earnest in October when we start the first unit.
One of the things, we're going to give you a little sneak peek about what Jack is going to say tomorrow night, but one of the things that he will tell us is that this province could save a whole lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, if we purchased power from Quebec instead of trying to generate it ourselves. Check the monitor over your shoulder there, and we will play the clip of Jack Gibbons tomorrow night from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. Roll it, please, Sheldon.
The best option to meet our electricity needs is water power. And instead of rebuilding our aging nuclear reactors, Premier Wynne should have negotiated a deal with Quebec to import low-cost water power from Quebec.
He says if we did that, we'd save $600 million. Is that an option?
Well, I think it's a false choice that Jack's presenting. I think that exploring water power from Quebec is something we ought to do as a province, and that is actively being pursued because I think it's likely a part of our future. One of the things you have to realize is that we buy power from Quebec now, and we sell Quebec capacity because they are short of generating capacity in the winter. And so we have a capacity exchange program. The fact is that the generating stations and the transmission to do that don't exist today and are probably greater than $10 billion in the making, along with several $billion to construct the transmission.
But you wouldn't have to build them, though, would you? Hydro One would build them.
Hydro One would build them, but right. Someone's still got to build them, and the cost associated with that is going to be embedded in the price of the power. My point is that power is not available as we sit here today. It should be explored and leveraged for us over the long term, and I think it will. It is not a substitute for Darlington, Pickering, or Bruce Power, which, as you pointed out, generate 62% of the electricity in the province today. The approach here should be to preserve our nuclear asset for another generation, carbon-free, low cost, 7 to 8 cent power. Leverage the hydro assets we have in the province in order to get the most out of those, and explore all the alternatives from our neighbors for low cost, sustainable, low carbon electricity. It's not a choice between these alternatives. We've got to pursue them all if we're going to be successful.
One of the things I've heard as well, and you can tell me whether you find this to be your experience, is that we want to, it's funny, I'm going to use a French expression here because they use it in Quebec, maître chez nous. We want to be masters of our own house. And that if we rely too much on Quebec for our energy generation, we won't be. Is that a concern?
I think it is a concern. It's not the only concern. Look, transmitting power over long distances has risks associated with it. It has reliability risks. It has economic risks. You want to try to look at the Ontario footprint, exploit the resources we have, build the capacity that we ought to build, spend those dollars in the Ontario economy where they can multiply. You need to think very carefully about exporting dollars and dependence to an adjacent province. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means you have to do it in balance, as with most things. It's a part of the solution, not the entirety of the solution.
One of the things Jack also says is that the nuclear industry is expert at lobbying government to ensure that whatever future projects are going to be done here on the nuclear industry as opposed to out of province. Is lobbying a factor in this as well?
No, I don't agree with that. What is a factor is the price of the power. Darlington is 7 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which is very low cost power. And I'm very doubtful that you could replicate that by investing money in Quebec and in transmission and importing it here. It's greenhouse gas free and it benefits the economy of the Ontario. Again, I don't think lobbying has to do with it. I think it's clearly the lowest cost, most environmentally beneficial power we can focus on right now. And again, I don't think that it's in competition with power from Quebec. I think they're complementary. We should pursue both.
Okay, let's get one more issue on the table here. And you've been quite accurate in saying that the lion's share of what you do, 99+% of what you do, doesn't put smoke up into the air and cause greenhouse gases. However, there are obviously complications with nuclear energy. For example, the waste that is created. The federal government's going to make a decision on whether to allow OPG to bury its nuclear waste in what's called a deep geological repository near the Bruce nuclear site. It's about 1 kilometer away from Lake Huron. And Sean McCarthy has been covering this issue in the Globe and Mail, and here's an excerpt of what he wrote recently. For nuclear power producers, the Bruce Deep Geological Repository represents part of a long-term answer to a thorny problem that has dogged the industry since its post-war inception. What to do with the radioactive waste that will remain dangerous long after the reactors are gone, in some cases for hundreds of thousands of years. In fact, OPG is currently storing low and intermediate level waste at ground level at the site, but it wants a permanent solution. In cottage-friendly towns like Inverhuron, Kincardine, Tiverton, and Saugeen Shores, neighbors have taken opposing sides. Lawn signs proclaiming no nuclear waste dump and save our shores sprouted like weeds this summer, and at public meetings, prominent speakers have declaimed against the risk of contaminating the Great Lakes, which provide drinking water for 40 million people. Why are you so confident that this site near Lake Huron is the way to go?
Yes. Well, if I can comment first on the issue of waste. So this certainly is an issue for the nuclear industry. I don't see it as an unsolvable problem. The technology, the engineering, the safety provisions all exist to safely handle and dispose of radioactive waste. In this case, we're talking about very low and intermediate level waste. So in and of itself, not a very toxic substance. It's fairly straightforwardly managed. We store it safely above ground now. But that is not the optimum long-term solution. A permanent solution is what we need. In the case of the DGR at Kincardine, what we have is a geologically very suitable site. We've done exhaustive science looking at this, looking at sites across Canada and looking at this particular site. This geographically may be near Lake Huron. Geologically, it's 1,000 miles away in the Coburn Rock Formation, extremely impermeable, solid, seismically stable rock formation that is just tailor-made to receive waste like this with confidence that it will be safe for generations.
Why don't the locals believe that?
Well, actually, our view is that we have strong local support. As in anything controversial like this, there are some who oppose, but our assessment is we have strong local support and sponsorship, and that emerges each time we get to a milestone in this project. We believe we have that, and we believe we'll continue to have that. And that's built on being very open and transparent with this process. So we believe it's a good site. We believe we have the right local support. We believe it can be stored safely. Now, I've got to acknowledge that it's controversial and it takes time politically, socially, to be able to vet these things and ensure that everyone has the level of confidence we have, or at least nearly everyone, as we proceed through the process. And so we're going to continue to work with the government, follow their lead, make sure we exhaust every question and every concern as we head toward what we hope will ultimately be the right long-term solution for disposal of this waste.
One last question. You've come into this job at a particularly sensitive time in the history of the province of Ontario, right? We've just come through, in the previous Liberal government, some really questionable things around gas plants being canceled at the 11th hour during election campaigns and all of this business. The partial privatization of Hydro One, I know that's not your company, but energy issues are big right now. And there is a feeling out there among a lot of people, I think, that the relationship between the industry and maybe the government and the regulators is too cozy right now, and the public confidence as a result of all of this stuff, much of which happened before you got here, obviously, is concerning. What would you say to that?
Well, I personally believe in strong, independent, and effective regulators. I view that as an executive as being one of the more important elements of my success. So as I look at it as an outsider, I don't have the history here. Our primary regulators are the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, who I view as extremely technically credible, competent, with very clear and disciplined processes. We just went through one on the Darlington relicensing, so I had an opportunity to participate in it. And I would tell you that's as good as any regulatory process I've seen in the world. The second primary regulator for me is the Ontario Energy Board. They regulate costs and rates. And once again, my view is a strong and competent OEB who can scrutinize our rate proposals to make sure that they are prudent, reasonable, that there's a fair return on the investment, but that customer interests are protected is paramount. My experience so far with the OEB is that they are that, at least in dealing with OPG. I can't speak for the rest of the agencies they deal with. So, my view is strong regulators are important. It seems to me we have them here, but I'll learn more about that over the coming years as I take issues to them.
And the public ought to have confidence in the energy system in this province?
They should. Yeah, I think the energy system in this province is actually quite a remarkable asset. This system has been decarbonized, as you showed. It's primarily nuclear, hydro, a small dose of gas, and a growing segment of renewables. I think that's the generation portfolio of the future. Most of the rest of North America is going to have to follow suit in this direction. Ontario got there quicker. Some might say at too high a cost. I'm not the person to judge that. But I think the position this system in is quite strong, particularly as we face the challenge in the province of decarbonizing the rest of the economy, which is primarily transportation, home heating, and industry. The electricity system is going to have to play a role in that. Electrification is a very viable way to do some decarbonization of those sectors. And so building off of this base, I think is a great place to start it.
Gotcha. Jeffrey Lyash, it's good of you to come into TVO tonight and take our questions. Good to meet you, and best of luck going forward.
Thanks, Steve. I enjoyed it.
Jeffrey Lyash, President, CEO, OPG.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.